Congressman Gutierrez, again, thinking in terms of American families, what are you seeing both in Illinois and here in Washington?
Well, what I see is more and more people needing health care. It's vital and fundamental. We have 47 million. I remember when I got to Congress, it was 41, 42. Every year it increases. And it's not about, we need comprehensive health care for everyone in this nation, and we can afford to do it. We have the resources to do it. It's not about accepting the Canadian or the Swiss version or any other. This is America. Let's have the best version, the American version, where everybody that gets sick has the ability to go and see a doctor. I think we have to look at health care from a public policy as a basic, fundamental human right, because it really is about life and death, and not as something that maybe you get if you're lucky, as we heard earlier, if you have a job. Look, we have seen $700 billion go to a bailout of Wall Street. And let me tell you, I voted for it because they said that would loosen the screws. And then we gave them $700 billion, and what did they do? They didn't lend anybody money to go to college. They didn't lend any money so they could open up a small business. And let me say, those toxic assets that they keep talking about, those are our people's homes. That's where they raise their children. Those are our neighborhoods. They're not toxic to us. Those are our neighborhoods. So I think we should get the financial institutions to also restructure that debt, because obviously we have restructured the debt of those investment bankers on Wall Street who, while people were suffering, continued to give themselves huge bonuses while the rest of the country was suffering. So just to end, look, I'm really happy, Barack Obama, because we're going to save a lot of money on a war that shouldn't have been started so that we can invest that money, not in war, but on health care for people here in this country.
Congressman Gutierrez, thank you very much. Now we're going to, before we take some questions from the audience, I wanted to go to our Reverend on this roundtable, Reverend Kevin Turman, who is from the historic Second Baptist Church in Detroit, been there 20 years. And of course, Reverend Turman is known to many of you in this audience because he's president of Moses, which is a Gamaliel Foundation affiliate in Detroit. Reverend Turman, you've heard your fellow panelists, including members of Congress, talk about the impact of the economic crisis. Congressman Gutierrez brought in the war. All of these factors have brought us to this moment. But what do you see on the ground as you try to serve people in your church?
Well, I see that this economic crisis, first of all, it is old. It is older than 8 years. And then also, I want people to understand that it has a race aspect as well. Because you need to understand that in many of our urban centers, 50% of African-American males are unemployed. That's fathers, that's husbands, that's brothers, that's sons. This has a devastating impact on African-American families, as you can imagine. This didn't start 8 years ago. For decades, there has been a disinvestment in urban centers that encourage jobs and people to move out to the suburbs, segregated suburbs that were segregated by federal policies. So I think people need to understand just how widespread this crisis really is. Now, it might sound like I'm just talking about policy, but I think you need to understand that when you don't have the funds, then you don't have the transit, you don't have affordable housing, people can't live where the jobs are. People can't get to where the jobs are. We have Detroiters who have to get up and catch a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning in order to be at work at 9 o'clock. That doesn't make sense. That's not fair, it's not just, and we're going to have to change the way we do business if we're going to really meaningfully impact our cities.
All right. From the audience comes a question, and the question is directed to the two congressmen. The question is, many people are blaming immigrants for our economic problems. How would you explain the connection between immigration and the economic crisis that we face today? Let me start with Congressman Gutierrez.
Well, first, it is simple to blame others. It is usually the easiest way to go about looking at a problem. Politicians have two avenues. Number one, they can give you a solution, which obviously Washington hasn't given us, to the economic crisis that we have in the immigration policy that is broken down. So they blame the immigrants for the problem. Look, we need comprehensive immigration reform so that we stop pitting entry-level workers and immigrants against one another to the benefit of employers, not to the benefit of the workers. And if you have comprehensive immigration reform, then everybody can organize. We see this happening all across our country. Look, our immigration system is broken, but it's also circular. Everybody complains. I watch it on the news all the time. Oh, those immigrants are sending money back to their moms and dad and their family. We should praise people that are our neighbors that are helping their brothers and their sisters back home. Those are the kind of neighbors I want.
That's right.
But understand fundamentally that when they send money back home, they buy goods produced in the United States of America. Indeed, we're all in it together. I just want to state this. Farm workers across this country picking fruits, that's not going to help the worker in Chicago. He's not going to go pick oranges. He's not looking to pick apples. That's a job that somebody else is doing. Let's make sure we have a system that says, first of all, no American citizen should ever be denied a job opportunity at the expense of anyone else, number one. But that fundamentally everybody's job and everybody's work should be respected. And that we all doing together can build a better economy for us all.
Congressman Sarbanes, how do you understand the connection between immigration and the financial difficulties we face today?
Well, I want to follow on what Luis said, which is that if you go to the places where immigrants are getting beat up, you will find that workers of all kinds and categories and constituencies are being beaten up. So part of the problem here is that we've turned them into the bogeyman, right? We've heaped things on them because they can't fight back. But when we don't fight back on their behalf, we don't empower them to fight back, there's a lot of other people that get affected and a lot of communities that get affected. So to do the right thing and have comprehensive immigration reform policies, as was said, is going to do the right thing for all of our communities, and it's going to get us away from this scapegoating, which is so divisive.
So many of the questions that have come from you really come down to one question. What is the one thing that the people on this panel would recommend to you as you go back to your communities? The one thing they would recommend for you to do, to make a priority as you try to deal with the financial crisis that is sweeping the country. Larry, let me start with you.
Well, what we really need in this country are some good jobs. We need jobs which have health insurance. We need jobs that have a family paycheck, and we need a lot of them now because in the future, we're really going to see a lot of job loss over the next few years. We need a massive effort to create jobs and get it to all the people that need it, all the communities that need it. The thing as an economist that bothers me the most as a human being is that all the problems we've seen over the last 30 years, these are man-made problems. These are nothing that had to happen. We had more income go to the upper 1% than went to the bottom 99%. It took a lot of power. It took a lot of power to make that happen, and now we got a lot of power that's going to reverse that, right?
Larry, is there one thing, though, that people who are organizers, people who are out there every day can do in order to create those jobs that you're talking about?
Well, it's hard to limit it to one thing, but I think we're going to need massive doses of public works and infrastructure. We need to give money to people who are going to spend it right now. We need to not worry about the deficit because we got to put money into the economy that's going to create jobs. Because if we don't, we're going to see 10% unemployment in a year and a half. That's going to be 20% black unemployment. That's going to be unemployment of very high in neighborhoods where they permanently live in a recession. Now they're going to be sunk into a depression. And if we don't do that, people are really going to be hurting. And we can. There's nothing about what's going to happen to us that can't be reversed.